the narrative that we grew up in. That this world is different than it was in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, and we have to have the language, the intergenerational conversation informed by the young people. We need a conversation informed by the young people so we can learn a new language to teach you your history and the solutions that lie in it. So I want to spend just a little bit of time, we've been having a lot of talking from me and a lot of other people, but I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about why it's important that we have ethical leadership in the Black community. And it's true of every community, but I'm focused on our history and our community, and so that's the lens I want to bring. Marcus Garvey said, a man without knowledge of his history or roots, or a man without knowledge of his history or culture is like a tree without roots. Marcus Garvey was a great Pan-Africanist. He believed that things could get better in the United States, but they'd be even better if we could go back home, if we could have a new language, if we could learn a new system. One thing Naomi Tutu has, she was on the radio with me a couple of weeks ago, that we don't, is a sense of nationalism. She's first South African, not Black. We are in America first Black and then everything else. And that's a problem. In our leadership institutions, we require people like Fannie Lou Hamer, who, at risk of her own death, she, by the way, died of untreated breast cancer in the struggle for her people. But at 45 years old, she was kicked off of her sharecropping farm, all for asking the Democratic National Convention for the right to vote. A majority narrative tells you that all Blacks vote Democrat. I'm not saying that I'm for the Democrats or the Republicans. I'm personally an independent. And I think you ought to consider being an independent too. Because the issue is what matters, not the individual. Is the person working on something that matters to you? So let's take a look at our organizations in the Twin Cities that are Black. And let's take a quick review of the state of them. We have an agency that existed since 1975, African American Family Services, now defunct, merging with the white organization. We have an urban league that has two buildings, one on the south side with not too many people in it, and one on the north side that doesn't have as many people as it used to. We have Turning Point, which is an excellent organization working in behavioral health, and somehow Peter has managed to stay afloat in an industry that doesn't pay for people to be well. We have Phyllis Wheatley Community Center. A woman, Barbara Milam, runs the organization and keeps it strong so that the babies can understand. Phyllis Wheatley was the first African American to ever write a poem, and she was born in slavery, and she was right here in Minnesota. We have very few other organizations. Our NAACPs are trying to regroup, but they're on the bubble. And I would argue that part of the reason that these things are true is because of structural racism and institutional practice, and certainly people don't want Black things to prevail. The museum, for example, that I guess the ancestors have given to me to try to shepherd, has been trying to open since 2009. And it's interesting to me that we have a Swedish Institute and a Minneapolis Institute of Arts, and millions of dollars of Hennepin County taxpayer money goes to keep the Institute of Arts afloat so you don't have to pay. But we can't get the museum to honor Black contributions in Minnesota open. So we've got to ask ourselves, aside from the structural racism and aside from the institutional practice and aside from all the things that we know are true, what James Baldwin called a horrible catalog of disaster, the fact that it was his women who built this country on the murder of his children for nothing. These are things that we must take into account, but we must also take into account the state of our leadership. There are a lot of people who get on these stages and come to panels and promise you great things. The question is, what do you get when they get off the stage and the lights are down?
Come on, come on.
The question is not what they puff up and say they've done and what they've been a part of. The question is, what are you doing right now, and how are you helping right now? And it's not a matter of trying to look at your brother and down him. It's a matter of saying, if you're going to say you're going to leave this organization, then you're going to be honest. If it says you say you're going to leave this organization, you're going to be transparent. And you're not going to tell the truth as you see it. You're going to tell the whole truth and nothing but it. When I was the executive director at African American Family Services, people would look at me crazy because I would say, you know, it is my goal one day to work myself out of the job. And people would say, what? Girl, you don't want my job? And I'd say, no, I just don't want this job. Because that would mean that Black people have overcome addiction. We've overcome mental health difficulties. And you have no need for this agency. Wouldn't that be wonderful? We've got leaders who hang on too long, who stay 25 and 30 and 50 years, so the young people who are emerging can't get up. If we're already not given enough jobs in our community, what does it mean when we stay in them until we're 75 and 80 years old? we have to start asking of our leaders, are you still believing to take it the next part of the race?
That's right.
I look at the Black community and I think of our work as more of a relay that Spike Moss handed the baton to me, my father handed it to me, and I'm trying desperately to hand it to my nieces who sometimes call me the Blacktivist and don't want it, but I suspect one day they'll be happy they got it, whether they wanted it or not. I think it's important and imperative that our leaders know our history, that they can advise you about solutions that matter, and not a lot of rhetoric, not puffing up about what they've done, but actually things that you can do that will improve the quality of your life. Too often I've seen leaders of every community render the people powerless. That if I keep all the books and the money and everything for myself, then you'll need me all the time and I can maintain my job. We don't need that kind of leadership anymore in the Black community. The last thing that I'd like to share with you about this idea of leadership, because I know we've been at this conference a long time and we've got events tonight, but it's really on my heart, is that when you are talking about ethics, you're talking about doing in the dark what you would do in the light and not doing in the dark what you wouldn't do in the light. A lot of our leadership coming up before me has been wounded by deals that they had to do to make things happen, and I'm not making judgment. I'm simply saying that once you cash the check on your integrity, you never get it back. I argue a lot with the men of the village. I know we were speaking conciliatory up here and everything, and it's true. We are conciliatory, but there are too few women in the mix. I was in a meeting the other day about Black leadership in crisis, and there was everybody was a guy except me. And I said to myself, you dudes have been around too long if we still don't have more women in these rooms. If you're not at the table, the decision will be made for you. And so we've got to get clear that if we want leaders in our community, that they have to be ethical and honest, not perfect. Not perfect, because that's what the majority narrative has done to Dr. King. He was such a transcendent human being, I'm surprised he was even human, to be honest. I'm almost certain that the ancestors sent him here and just let us think that he was human, because he was able to transcend race. So as soon as he overcame, the narrative became what he did in the bedroom without his wife. I say, does it matter to you at the end of the day? Because the man gave his life. So whatever story they want to write, Malcolm X didn't reach 40 so you could live. And he never saw your face. Fannie Lou Hamer was beaten by Black men at the behest of white jailers so you would have the right to vote Republican or Democrat. That we would know the names of Zora Neale Hurston and their eyes were watching God, that she was a major force of nature in the Harlem Renaissance and died penniless. These things can be prevented by ethical, righteous leadership. The piece that I wanted to share with you today is Stop Waiting on the Savior. Langston Hughes has a poem I like to do on the radio. If you listen sometimes, you might hear it. It's called The Ballad of Roosevelt. He's talking about the fact that while his mom and dad were counting on President Roosevelt to change their condition, they lost their house, they became poor, the doctor wouldn't come to see his sister. And the question is, why did they keep waiting? And then one day his parents woke up and they realized it was cold outside. So they stopped waiting on Roosevelt. And then everybody who had been waiting on Roosevelt with them started to wake up to the fact that Roosevelt wasn't coming anytime soon, and they were still going to be hungry and cold and without a home and unable to take care of their children. So he's asking, why do we keep waiting on Roosevelt? The beauty of the civil rights movement was in some ways that we had Dr. King and Fannie Lou Hamer, but the story is never told about the Great Migration. That we had no leader when blacks changed the face of the United States of America because we got up and left. We said the South is lynching us on a daily basis and we will not stay. The problem was the North wanted the labor, but not the people. Isabel Wilkerson wrote a terrific book. And now I'm The Warmth of Other Suns. It documents for you Mahalia Jackson and Jesse Owens, Langston Hughes, and President Barack Obama, and how their people made it over. It's probably 1,600 pages, but I guarantee you it's worth the read. Stop waiting for someone to pick it up, fix it up, or make it better. I had a young man, Walter and I, call on the radio last night. Today is Friday. Called on the radio last night, and he said, you know, one of the things I think we need is a weekly urban agenda time, where we get together, we rap about things in the village, and let the young people say what they want to say. And I want to say, okay, baby, then when are you going to organize it? See, that's the difference. One way of doing things is to say, why don't you fix it? Why don't you do it? My question is, it's not here for you. Why you want to wait on me? You can have a conversation without me. You've been here living your whole life. Many of you would never even know my name. So what strikes me in our young people is that you must seek to lead from your own space. Whether you're at the high school of reporting arts or you're teaching kids about young people, I should say, about venereal disease and sexually transmitted disease, those are hard conversations to have. And if our adults can't have them with our young people, then our young people absolutely need you to have them for us and to teach us how to have them with our future generations. Leadership doesn't have to have an age, it doesn't need a title, and you don't need a lot of money. Most of the work I do isn't even paid for. People don't even know that my husband is a big part of the reason the village gets pro bono. But those heroes are never written about. Nobody ever knows their name. And if you're waiting for someone to puff you up on a big stage, you'll never make it anywhere. So you're going to have to find a way to love yourself, find your strength, get your gig, and bring it to the village. And do what only you can do. If you can sing, sing. If you can rap, rap. If you can teach, teach. If you can educate, educate. If you can lead, lead. Do what you do. But bring all that goodness into the village. And demand of your leadership what you would demand of yourselves. To be able to lead in the kinds of ways that help us keep our dignity as a community, that help our organizations maintain their strength, and that bring healing to the people of the village in a way that it is needed. I'm struck by the number of times I hear in all of these circles, all these people saying terribly negative things about Black people. Yeah, we have a problem with drugs. Yeah, some of us don't go to school. Yeah, some of us get into crime, but not any more than anybody else. The story is never in the falling down, y'all, it's in the giving up. The whole idea that we are still here is significant. A lynching was a death, usually a hanging, sometimes by fire. These are things that are difficult to relate to because a generation that you're growing up with thinks the N-word is something good. As Spike would say, you've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, and brainwashed. That's what Malcolm X talked about. The minute you believe that our people are the lowest common denominator, that we cannot successfully run our organizations, that we don't make excellent presidents, that Michelle and Barack Obama are exceptions to the rule of excellence in the Black community, you have drank the Kool-Aid. You have ingested the Kool-Aid. So what I want to do is leave you with something that, whether you are Black or not, I hope helps you keep your back straight. The reason I like it is because I think it starts out by telling us the narrative that the world wants to give us. And poor Walter will have to forgive me because we do this one a lot on the show. But it's one that ends right. So that when you leave here, you can keep your back straight with the dignity of Fannie Lou Hamer. That you will remember that this education that you are getting comes on the back of Frederick Douglass. That Harriet Tubman, it is told, on the day she crossed over to the north, she looked down at her hands and said she saw a glory over everything. And every day I wake up Black. I think to myself, thank you, Lord. Did you make me Black, Lord? Lord, why did you make me Black? Why did you make someone the world would hold back? Black is the color of dirty clothes, of grimy hands and feet. Black is the color of darkness, of tired, beaten streets. Why did you give me thick lips, a broad nose, and kinky hair? Why did you create someone who receives the hated stare? Black is the color of the bruised eye when someone gets hurt. Black is the color of darkness. Black is the color of dirt. Why is my bone structure so thick, my hips and cheeks so high? And why are my eyes brown and are the color of the sky? Why do people think I'm useless? How come I feel so used? Why do some people see my skin and think I should be abused? Lord, I just don't understand. What is it about my skin? Why is it some people want to hate me and not know the person within? Black is what people are labeled when others want to keep them away. Black is the color of shadows cast. Black is the end of the day. Lord, you know my own people mistreat me. You gotta get right on this, y'all. And they know it just ain't right. They don't like my hair, they don't like my skin because they think I'm too dark or too light. Lord, don't you think it's time to make a change? Why don't you redo creation and make everyone the same? The Lord replied, why did I make you black? Why did I make you black? I made you in the color of coal, from which beautiful diamonds are formed. I made you in the color of oil, the black gold that keeps people warm. Your color is the same as the rich dark soil that grows the food you need. Your color is the same as the black stallion and panther. Oh, what majestic creatures indeed. All colors of the heavenly rainbow can be found throughout every nation, and beauties when all these colors are blended, you become my greatest creation. Your hair is the texture of lamb's wool, such a beautiful creature is he. I'm the shepherd who watches them, and I will always watch over thee. You're the color of the midnight sky. I put star glitter in your eyes. There's a beautiful smile hidden behind your pain. That's why your cheeks are so high. You are the color of the dark clouds I create from the hurricanes I create in September. I made your lips so full and thick, no naughtiness. So when you kiss, they will remember. Your stature is strong, your bone structure thick to withstand the burden of time. The reflection you see in the mirror, the image that looks back, it's mine. So get off your knees, Pan-African students, and tell me, what do you see? I never made you in the image of darkness. I made you in the image of me. Keep your back straight.
Ask her anything and everything. She's a wealth of knowledge.
I won't tell you what I don't know, that's for sure.
Okay, let's open it up for questions. Any questions for Lissa Jones?
Hi, my name is Tanit, and I'm from St. Catherine University. And I wanted to know how to respond rather than react to, say, somewhat ignorant comments. I know when I was transitioning into high school, a lot of people told me that some of the scholarships that I earned that were academic-based were not. They were because I was black. And I found that really frustrating, and I don't know how to respond to that without going on. Yeah, because then I guess I don't want to feel like an angry black girl, because I feel like
You know, that's an excellent, I'm glad to meet you. Thank you. I think that's an excellent question. If you sort of heard what she was saying, there are a couple dynamics that are going on. People just say ignorant things. They told Malcolm X he could never be a lawyer, Malcolm was killed as a lawyer. Are you kidding me? Right? But people say ignorant things like when we earn an academic scholarship, that it isn't academics that got us there, it isn't our excellence, it's because we're black or we're female. And then if you go off, if you respond in a negative way, then they call you the angry black woman and you're put into a box. So how do you respond? I think sometimes you do have to go slap off. Not really. I mean, we hope it's not the first thing you have to do, but some people are just that ignorant. But most of the time, what you can do is you can fill them with kindness. You say, you know, I feel terrible for you. What a prison that must be to live like that. I really can't imagine if my world were that small, just how difficult it would be to be in a world. And then people start looking like, what do you mean you feel sorry for me? Oh, I feel real sorry for you. Because anybody stuck in that value system and those beliefs is going to find very few friends. You're not going to have a very rich life because you won't talk to very many people and you won't want to go to certain countries because they aren't the people that you know. So you start first by asking them, do you understand what you're really saying to me? Are you suggesting that I can't get it on my academics, that it has to do with the fact that I'm black? And then if it's a hopeful case, you might want to show them a little bit about black history or teach them a little bit about your culture. And if it's a hopeless case, you might just say, you know, I'll have to lift a prayer. Literally. Because I've been in the situations where people have said, oh, you are so articulate. I hate that. I'm so articulate. As what? I'm articulate compared to whom? Now, if you're saying saying I'm articulate because I'm articulate, that's one thing. If you're saying I'm articulate because most people, black people don't speak the King's English, then I'm a little offended.
Come on.
I try to blame that on race and the myth of it and not the people. Because some of us are so racialized and so sick that your job will have to be to transcend it. Dr. King was the moral compass for the United States of America, and he talked about it, not in himself, but the way that America treats black people demonstrates its moral compass, its level of morality in the world. And so if we are dealing with the issue of race that somebody else created, James Baldwin said, give them their problem back. I agree with that to some extent, only it's all of our problem. And if they can't fix it, then we are going to have to fix it. So going slap off doesn't usually get us anywhere. But I do understand why we feel it necessary to do that sometimes. The last thing I would say is recognize where stereotypes come from and who they serve. The angry black woman isn't our stereotype, but somebody else's to serve a narrative that isn't ours. And so just because they made it up doesn't mean you have to own it. George Washington never told a lie. They wrote it down in a book, and now everybody believes that. Huh. That's the power of words. So you tell them, I've never known an angry black woman. I've known black women who get angry. I've known white women who get angry. But I've never known a profile of an angry black woman where all we do is stay angry. But if that serves your purpose and your narrow worldview, sir, ma'am, well then I feel for you.
Hi, my name is Veronica. I've been running into a lot of women, and I see they don't love themselves, and they're always angry. It seems like every time I run into them, they're angry or they're complaining about something, a guy, their baby's father, something. And it's like, I understand you're going through these things, but how about you look at the positive side, And I just want to know, what are some other ways to get to them and show them you have to love yourself no matter what you're going through, because if you don't love yourself, nobody else will. And they look at me like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about because you've never been in this situation, but I know what's right and wrong. Sometimes I don't know the right thing to say to them without hurting their feelings or coming down on them.
That's a really good question. It's nice to meet you. When I was younger, I was a lot angrier. I was a lot angrier. You see the mythologies of race and what it does to your people, and something they've never done, they don't deserve it, and you first get angry, and then you go to work. That's what I say. And so I, like my father, his time was a hothead, and I'd be the first one to call it tear it up. Ain't no problem with me, man. I can say what I want to say. What I realize is that it works in some contexts, but not every. And so when people are being particularly angry or negative, it's often a reflection of their life circumstance.
Right.
What I know at 45 is I get angry a lot less. I think that has to do with my husband. He's such a sweet guy. I get angry a lot less, but I have a lot more gratitude than I do anger. And it's difficult when you're in the valley to focus on the gratitude. But I think sometimes a simple word of a sister calling and saying, girl, I'm so sick of this. And I think to myself, baby, we woke up this morning, we're still in the fight. And sometimes you just need a person to speak one piece of life into your life, and it will change the entire conversation. What it also does is help to diminish the weight of the problems when someone just speaks kindly to you about your condition. Girl, I may not have been there before, but I know pain. I may not have had this particular circumstance, but I know relationships. This may never have happened to me, but I have kids too. I think about the number of times Oscar Grant, Renisha McBride, Trayvon Martin, Jordan Davis. Every single time I hear the names of those young people, it hurts my heart. And I think to myself, I don't know their mothers, but I know their mother's heart. And I thank God I've not lost any of my children, but I don't think it would keep me from being able to minister to them, at least in a way to say, I feel what you're feeling, sister. He's our son too. And I worry daily about all of us. So sometimes I think a little bit of empathy goes a long way, and the degree to which you have gratitude for the things that are happening to you gives you an opportunity to share the gratitude for everything that's happening with somebody else and help them maybe see something a little bit different.
And I would like to add something to that. A lot of times we confuse anger with depression. Depression runs deep within the African American woman's lifestyle. And a lot of people, when we talk about mental health issues, we are constantly ignoring the mental health issues of African American women. Mental health is one condition that is ignored in the community. We don't like to talk about it. And it's the one thing, combined with poverty, that leads to the pathway of prison. Okay? So, when we talk about angry sometimes, don't confuse it with depression. Because we will oftentimes come off as angry when we're depressed. And the conditions that many African American women have to live with, whether it be a disrespectful father, a disrespectful other family member, a boyfriend, sometimes we can't differentiate or fix our relationships because we have no reference point. You see? And so we combine it with the children that are in our lives and the dramas that come along with that. And the trials and the challenges of trying to deal economically. So don't confuse anger with depression. Sometimes, you know, we like to throw around the book Daughters of the Yam, to talk about depression, talk about sisterhood. And you don't have to be that pillow all the time because you don't want to, you know, this is love company, trust me. Let's be mindful of that. But sometimes your sister needs a hug and someone to just listen and not tell them what to do. They just want you to listen. That's all.
That's good. There's a question over there.
One more.
The older I get, the less I can see it.
I have a question.
My name is Marjorie Sack, and I go to school here at MSU. And my question is, in your poem you talked about being too light and being too dark. Could you, I don't know, give advice or speak on just, I guess, the youth and how do you get them to realize no matter what tone you are, dark or light, you are beautiful the way you are? Because now, as an older adult, you know, being a dark-skinned woman, I have my insecurities about that, and I see that in my young, like, nieces and nephews and cousins, and they feel bad when they're around other people because they feel like they're not beautiful because of their dark skin. And they get teased and stuff like that. So how do we teach them that it's okay to love who you are? And I'm not telling you this because I'm your family member, but this is true. Like, you are beautiful the way you are.
There's a documentary, Kerry Davis in 2006, for a high school senior in New York. It's called, thank you, A Girl Like Me. You can go on YouTube and watch it, and she's talking about, in this case, light-skinned and dark-skinned girls going through what's called colorism. The closer the white is right, if the black you're back, if the brown you're down. Because the world narrative says who is right? White. And so it would come naturally that if all you saw, in the case of James Baldwin, was Jimmy Stewart in his time killing the Native Americans, and you didn't realize that in the movie the Native Americans were you, and suddenly you wake up and you realize that I've grown up in this all-white world and I'm not white, and so I must not measure up. That's the disease of colorism. The suggestion that I'm not black enough, but if you are even 1/8 black,
Come on.
they consider you all the way black. So you get as light as you're black, and they still gonna keep you black. The idea that dark-skinned people have had to suffer the brunt of low self-esteem based on nothing but a mythology of race that suggests a social construct that was built for one group to benefit and everyone else to lose. And it takes the self-esteem of so many. There's a new documentary out called Dark Skin Girls, and it's about women talking about the problems that they go through just for being a gorgeous chocolate skin. I think it goes back to figuring out how you get right with yourself. You have to reject narrative that doesn't belong to you. I'm going to use a word I don't use very often, for effect. James Baldwin, in his 3-minute piece, Who is the Nigger? He said, you know, the interesting thing about the nigger is that you invented it. So it must be something unique. And one of the things about inventions is it often carries those inventions your fears for the worst part of what you can imagine to be. And for majority narrative, they have put that into the word nigger. Now, I'm a James Baldwin. I've never been a nigger. I've never seen a nigger. I've never known any niggers. So the best thing I can do with a nigger is give the person their problem back. We can do the same thing with colorism. I've never seen a culture that wants to tan all day long and then tell you your brown ain't down. That's what we need to be looking at, is some of the discrepancies, the inconsistencies.
Right.
That white is bright, but everybody's at the tanning booth and everybody's on the beach. So tell me, when does brown get to be better when it's on light skin? That doesn't even make any sense. That's the whole idea about this whole mythology of race that really needs to be deconstructed in our own minds. We will never be able to defeat racializing or racism. Racism, by the way, is a verb. I'm sure the professor taught you this, but there's no such thing as reverse racism because black people do not collectively have enough power to make racism a reality. It's a verb and not a noun. It's an action that's happening to you. And it requires power and persistence and precision.
Thank you.
So that's exactly right.
That's right.
And so I think around issues of colorism, we've got to get right in our own selves and figure that out. You know, I was 16 and I was sitting on a city bus coming from work one day, and these girls got on, and I didn't know them from anybody, and I'm just sitting there. And all of a sudden, there's B and this and that, and light skin, blah, 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 and I'm looking like, who are they talking? You know, I don't even know y'all. I mean, have I met you? I don't even know you. I mean, I don't know you. Are you talking to me? I mean, I'm sitting on the whole bus, like, who are they talking to? Why are they people looking at me? They were looking at me, trying to pick something with me because they thought that I was light and I thought I was better, even though I hadn't said a word. That's their sickness. I don't have to choose to take on that disease, though I do understand the root of it. Now, it might surprise you that my father is extremely chocolate brown. And for the whole of our childhood, we just wished he could be that brown. Please, what do we have to do? What do we have to do? We just want to be brown like that. I turn yellow in the winter. This isn't good. I want to be brown like my sisters and brothers. They don't think I'm black enough. So these states happen to different people for similar reasons. Some of us really believe that we're too dark or too light. And we have to defeat that kind of thinking in our own hearts in order to help our kids see something different. There's one thing I know about young people. You can try to BS them all day long. Old people will go for it. They're willing to ride sometimes. But you young people can tell a liar when you see one. And so if I tell you to love yourself, I'm sure you can be pretty aware if I don't love myself, then the advice is follow. But I would just suggest that it's something you talk about, and you talk about openly in our families, and we talk about the root of where colorism comes from, and we talk about defeating it. The white privilege activist Tim Wise was asked by Soledad O'Brien on CNN, why isn't colorism gone? And he said because it has its roots in a plantation where lighter skinned blacks were given the right to work in the house, but we don't talk about the relationship of the lighter skinned blacks having been born largely out of rape.
Right.
You don't want to be the product of your mother's rape, walking around serving tea to your master's wife. Might have seemed uglier in the field, but it's also ugly when it's in your face. And you have to bathe it and cook for it and serve it tea in glasses. And that's another kind of crazy thing about race. If black people are so bad, how can we rear your children, cook your food, you know what I mean?
And laid you on their breast.
There we go. And if somebody was doing all that, if I was doing all that stuff to somebody, I would want you to cook my food. I'm not gonna lie, I sit with one eye open. Because I realize at some point, something's gonna happen. So I really do think it's about starting with yourself and having honest conversations with the people around you about how you struggle. And then one day, like Mahalia Jackson, you'll be able to talk about it.
Go ahead.
Hi, I have a question. Here, cameraman. I think it's great that we have, such conferences as Dr. Michael T. Fagan Pan-African Student Leadership Conference. And it's so amazing for kids of our generations to connect with people like you, Dr. Jones and Dr. Truesdale, Mrs. Tanya Fagan. But what happens after this? I feel like throughout our generation, there's a gap in between our elders and the people of my generation to obtain such knowledge, if that makes sense. For John and myself, we work with them all the time, so we constantly get a reminder of who we are and where we come from. But for the majority of people who come to a conference where you find out that, even if you say, if you put bad in front of the B word, it's still a terrible thing. Or if you put A after nig, it's still a bad thing. So for people that come to the conference for just a weekend, how do you continue to connect the two generations when they're not constantly around this and they're not constantly hearing it? Because I think it's such a terrible thing, and I guess we try to do our best with, you know, keeping people knowledgeable about certain situations and things like that. But how do you keep that gap from widening?
Right. Good question.
It's an excellent question. It's sort of what I was alluding to on the panel earlier, which is we don't have the right narrative intergenerationally. So we're speaking about ability, we can't understand, and we can't understand where you're at, and we can't help you with solutions and translating. I think it's a two-part thing.